anybody else wants to mute for now, and then we'll get started, and then we'll unmute for the question and answer period. So today is People Solutions Center. It's okay. Is it Magoon, Katie?
It is.
She founded People Solutions Center in 2016 to help companies with their growing HR concerns. She's passionate about relieving the tension and the time that companies spend dealing with issues that create stress in the workplace and lower productivity. Katie has over 20 years of in-depth and varied human resources experience. She spent 15 years at Progressive Insurance, a Fortune 500 company, as a human resources manager, recruiting process leader, and recruiting director. Katie is passionate about volunteering across a variety of nonprofit organizations. She has held several leadership positions with the Delta Sigma Pi professional business fraternity, including National Professional Development Committee Chair, National Alumni Development Committee Chair, and trustee of the Delta Sigma Pi Leadership Foundation. The strong foundation of varied life experiences and business knowledge paired with her passion for leading workshops is the key to her success in human resources solutions. So everybody welcome Katie Magoon.
Great. Thank you all. It's great to see some familiar faces. So excited for that. And I look forward this morning. Our goal is really to talk about how do you hire and retain the best employees. And many of you I know are feeling the pain of this, either on the hiring side or on the retention side right now. We're going through a lot of really interesting market shifts that are making a huge difference. And I will tell you, this seems to be the general reaction that we are getting from people these days around both the retention and the hiring side of the house. And so if you're finding yourself this morning feeling a little frustrated at this whole employment situation, hopefully all of our tips today will give you some ideas on how to deal with these, and most importantly, how to get ahead of things, especially on the retention side of the house. We mentioned my HR experience. Most importantly, for the last 5 years, I've been running my own HR consulting firm. We have grown tremendously. We now have a team of 5 consultants working for a variety of small to mid-sized companies that are big enough to need HR, not necessarily big enough to need full-time HR. And it's been a great time amazing to be able to help so many busy businesses as they're trying to grow and yet facing challenges on a day-to-day basis. I thought we'd start today by talking about some of the 2021 trends that are impacting both hiring and retention. And what's really interesting about 2021, I've spent 25 plus years, I think I have to start rounding the other direction actually, in corporate HR. And I've seen a ton of different employment markets. As recruiting director for Progressive Insurance, my team handled all of the claims and contact center recruiting for the entire country. It was 8,000 to 10,000 hires a year. So I've paid attention to labor markets for a really long time. And I will tell you, I was sure I had seen them all. And then 2021 hit. And what's really interesting is it's even different than 2020 was from a labor market perspective. So here's 2 of the biggest trends that are impacting what you're feeling today as an employer. First and foremost, our candidate pool is about half the size it was going into COVID in 2020. Indeed is currently reporting that their overall candidate applications is down 50%. Now, everybody's asking, what is that all about? And we're continuing to hear people say, oh, it's a stimulus. And I will tell you, that may be a part of it, but it is a very small percentage of the market. What has actually, in addition to that, what is driving this in a huge way is, first of all, your current employees, people who are employed, are sitting tight for the moment. They are absolutely not quite ready to start making shifts and making moves. So your candidate pool is reduced considerably by the fact that you don't have what we used to refer to as either passive candidates or semi-active candidates. People who were interested in looking, but they weren't unemployed, ready to start working tomorrow. And so this candidate pool has become somewhat stagnant from that perspective. Now, I will say this has gotten interesting even just in the last probably month and a half. We're starting to feel this shift of individuals who are currently employed, but maybe were either frustrated with their employer during COVID, or they're like, oh, you know what? Now life is getting enough back to normal that I'm ready for that next career jump. We're starting to see that shift, and I'm hopeful that we'll continue to see those folks come back to the labor market in September. Now, you're probably thinking, well, why September? Schools are going to go back. And so what we will see most likely is that once folks, if you're thinking about your next career step, you probably don't want to jump that much during summer. Summers historically have much lower candidate volume in general because parents don't want to try to change jobs while they could be on vacation with their children or getting, camp settled and everything else. So hopefully in September, this will shift. But I'm still not sure it's going to be enough of a shift to cover our overall labor shortage. The other reason this is happening is we're having a huge, we for years have known that the baby boomers would be retiring soon. And when they did, it would be in large numbers at one period, like in one big swoop. We have seen that happen several years ahead of what originally was anticipated because of COVID. Either we had individuals that for health reasons decided I need to retire, or just said, you know what, I don't really I was willing to work for a few more years because I didn't hate my job. But boy, this is a lot harder when I have to do it from home, or this is a lot harder when I'm worried about being sick. So I'm going to retire early. Perfect example. I had one client who had two clients within a week of each other, had two people retire, announce retirements out of the blue. In both cases, we thought all of the people were at least 2 to 3 years away from retirement. So they had a succession plan, but it was 2 to 3 years out. So your labor market is definitely smaller than it used to be. We also have a lot of parents who still have not decided whether or not they're sending their kids back to school. And so those parents for the last year have been, homeschooling in a very different way. And so they may not be coming back to the employment market, or if they are, they haven't yet. So that's our first trend, is just very much a smaller labor market. Our second trend that we're seeing is what is going to be really interesting later in the year if we don't worry about retention. And that is a term that's been thrown around quite a bit of the great resignation. Individuals, because there is all this pent up, people did not move in 2020. If you had a job and you did not lose it, you weren't real quick to decide that this was the year you wanted one more change in your life. There are a lot of predictions out there that while it has not happened yet, it likely will happen later this year, where individuals who have just decided, you know what, I'm done with this, I'm ready to move on, will start to resign in larger numbers. And so we have this really interesting period where it's really hard to hire right now. And then later in the year, if you haven't gotten yourself set up for it, you are at great risk of losing people. And so now is a perfect time to really check in with folks and make sure that you're doing the right things on the retention side of the house. I'm going to start today's conversation with what are some of the best practices you should be thinking about from a hiring perspective, because this is the part of the trend that is here right now that you're likely struggling with as a business owner. We're then going to wrap up with some ideas on retention to make sure that you're ahead of that game. So what do you do to hire top talent? It is really important that you have implemented all of the possible best practices, because to be honest, in this labor market, you can't afford to be stubbing your toe from an employment perspective and from a hiring perspective, because there just aren't that many good candidates out there. So a couple of things that we're going to talk about real quickly today, because we have a short period of time, but building a sourcing strategy, managing your time to fill, identifying qualified candidates. How do you even know whether or not you're hiring top talent? Overcoming your hidden biases, and then most importantly, creating a candidate experience. Every single one of these things is so critical right now, or else you truly will get either. This is what's interesting is we used to say, well, I got a bunch of candidates, but none of them were qualified. You aren't even getting a bunch of candidates if you haven't gotten this part correct. So let's talk sourcing strategies first. Number one thing that we are finding is job ads matter. If you are simply taking the boring job description that you've always used, and it's a list of 100 things that this person needs to do in the job, and you're slapping it into Indeed or ZipRecruiter, you will not get good candidates, and you may not get any candidates at all. We have been rewriting job ads 2 and 3 times to get exactly the right verbiage around what's going to attract the candidate. And that wasn't what you had to do a year and a half ago. You could write a semi-decent ad a year and a half ago. You could write a good ad, a really good ad, and get a smaller candidate pool, but really high quality. Now you've got to tweak that ad for things like search engine optimization, making sure you're testing different keywords. You've got to be really creative in watching your job ads if you want your job ads to be successful. Most importantly, job ads are marketing pieces. They are not the list of 100 things you need to do. So you need to be thinking about, how do I highlight my culture? How do I address for the candidate? What's in it for me? This is all about sell, sell, sell at this point in the process. And we really need to shift our mindset from, I'll just throw up the job description, to you've got to make it fun. You've got to make it sexy. You've got to be real, but you have to be really transparent in your job ad about what the person will do. You can increase your chances of success if you will post the salary range in the job ad and make sure you have highlighted and been really clear on benefits. If you are not offering health benefits today, this is one of the number one things you need to start looking to get in place, because you won't be competitive in the market. You will lose. I had a client that could not offer health benefits, and I would say, of the candidates that we initially reached out to schedule, I think I contacted about 15 people for them for initial scheduling. And in that contact, I said, please verify that you are okay with the fact that we do not have health benefits. And they lost over 75% of those initial candidates that I reached out to, because people said, sorry, can't do it without health benefits. Once you get the ad and you get that ad just right, then it's about managing time to fill. You've got to have a really clear process defined up front with a timeline that's going to be followed so that you can ensure a really strong candidate experience. Good candidates are going fast. I had a client that got a resume last Thursday. We reached out Friday to schedule an interview. And she said by the time she responded on Monday, she said she already had another job offer. So your good candidates are going fast. You've got to be prepared to make sure that you can get on top of that candidate pool quickly and in an efficient manner. If they're waiting around for 2 or 3 weeks, you're likely going to lose them at any point in the process. Then you've got to get the right candidates. And this is where a lot of employers get tripped up. We get so excited that we have somebody that we forget to think about, do we have the person we actually want? This is a piece that a lot of employers have not necessarily had training on. So you end up thinking, well, what do I ask? And then even if you've got the questions, you're like, well, what's the right answer to what I ask? And ultimately your hiring ends up being a simple roll of the dice. And you will end up going, well, I hope I got the right person, which isn't a very comforting feeling when you're bringing on your new hire. Instead, we recommend that you do behavioral interviewing and that folks actually get trained on not just what to ask in the interview, but more importantly, what are you listening for in the answers? Because without understanding what you're listening for, you really are just rolling the dice on a regular basis. The idea behind behavioral interviewing is that past behavior predicts future behavior. So if I can find out the stories from you of how you've handled specific situations in the past, I'm likely to see how you're going to how you're going to handle them again in the future. This is key to really understanding whether or not someone has the competencies to do the role. Now, it's easy for people to give you a very surface level answer in behavioral interviewing. The reality is good interviewers know how to dig in further and really understand, not just did they come up with a story that sounded good, but did they demonstrate the competencies and skills they need to be good at the role. And so understanding how to conduct behavioral interviews is really important. The other piece that's key, and this actually ties to both hiring and retention, and it's this idea of getting to motivational fit. When we talk about motivational fit, it's about finding out what does the candidate like and dislike, and what will they spend a lot of time doing, and what will they never get to do in the role. You can see if I like doing something and I get to do it all the time, I'm going to be super happy and I'm likely to stay. On the flip side, if I hate doing something and I have to do it every day, I don't stick around very long. The same can be true on the other side of the house. So it's important that as we think about hiring the right candidate, we spend time thinking about what are the things that this person is actually going to do on a daily basis, and what are they never going to have the opportunity to do. I was just talking to a candidate last week who was interviewing for an accountant role. He had just finished his degree. He had his internship and was looking for his first job. And he told me, he said, my intern program offered me a full-time position in tax, which was what he was super interested in. He said, but what I found was prior to this, all through college, he had a ton of customer service work. He had worked in a restaurant. He had worked at bars. He had been out talking to people all of the time. He was actually one of the most extroverted accountants I think I've ever met. And what was interesting was in his role at the company he was at, their frontline, their entry-level accountants never spoke to the clients. They simply got the paperwork behind the scenes and did the accounting work and did the tax preparation and then handed it back. And he said, Katie, I was good at what I did, which is why they offered me my job. He said, I was miserable the entire time because I love talking to people and I had to sit in a back room the entire time. So he's out looking for a tax accountant role where he can actually be part of the client experience. You can see where from a motivations perspective, if he accepts that job and continues on with that company, ultimately the things that he likes doing, he's never going to get to do, which means he's probably not going to stay more than a year. So it's really important that when you're hiring people, you've gotten really clear for the role that you're hiring for, what are the things they're going to spend a lot of time doing and what are they never going to get to do? And how does that fit with what every individual candidate really likes? One of the ways that you can do this is to talk to the folks in your organization and understand, what do they love about the job? What do they not like? If there's something they could leave behind, what would it be? And the more you talk to folks that have been in the role for a long time, the more you'll get an understanding of how do you describe the role to a candidate, not in a way that's trying to talk them out of it, but more importantly, is really clear on where they'll spend their time and how that matches with their interests. Additionally, there's a motivational fit for the role, and then there's also this concept of organizational fit. We talk about, will they fit in our culture? We've got to be really careful because fit can start leading to unconscious bias. But if we understand what we mean by it, then we can really make some good decisions. And more importantly, we can share information with the candidate that allows them to make decisions as to whether or not this is the right place for them over time. So ask your employees, ask folks that have left the organization, what did they love about the organization? And on the flip side, what didn't they like so much? And you need to be really open to that feedback and recognize what are the things that you're just never going to be able to change about your organization that if you told people up front, they might not be so unhappy with. I'll give you an example. Over the years, I've hired a lot of people to work for different folks that maybe weren't the nicest bosses. And it's hard to hire somebody when I know they're working for somebody that is not particularly pleasant. But one of the tricks that I found is, you know what? There's a whole group of people out there who actually kind of thrive on working for people that are a little bit more difficult to manage. And so as long as I'm really clear on the front end, and I don't have to be rude and I don't have to make the person out to be mean, but I can be really upfront to say, you know what, this individual, first one to tell you, they're not the easiest person to work for. And here's why. But if I tell you that up front, you're far more likely to actually think about whether or not and share examples as to whether or not this is a good fit for you. So this piece around motivational and organizational fit becomes not only a great tool to understand how to ask the right things in the interview to get the best answers, but also how do you then use that information to help prepare people so that they understand what they're getting into, and now they're also willing to stay. I mentioned earlier this concept of unconscious bias, and this is critical in interviewing. If you do interviewing and you have not been through an unconscious bias session, strongly encourage you think about this because it is amazing to find out all of the different ways that our brains, whether we like it or not, have filters that impact how we see people, both positively and negatively. In our session, we actually talk about the fact that we make 11 judgments about people in the first 7 seconds that we meet them. And if you think about that in an interview setting, it's amazing that we ever can actually select the right person for a role because we have all this filter stuff going on. And so it's about making sure that we really understand how our brain works and how to use behavioral interviewing to overcome these unconscious biases and really be aware of them and the impact on their decisions. The final recommendation that we have for hiring is about candidate experience. And so often when we're hiring, we get really focused on, well, the person should want to come work for me. It is time. If it wasn't time before, and I'll tell you, it's been time for a long time, but it certainly is now in this market, it is time to drop our egos as employers. People don't need us, we need them, which means your candidate experience has to be at the very forefront of everything you're doing in your recruiting process. First of all, candidates won't hang around for the person that doesn't treat them well during the process anymore. But also, and just importantly, is if you think about this from a retention perspective, every interaction that candidate has with you up until the point they're hiring impacts whether or not they're going to be willing to stay long-term. If I've had a great candidate experience, I walk in my first day thinking, oh my God, I'm so excited to be here. This is so great. And then maybe when my onboarding experience isn't quite as perfect, I'm willing to give benefit of the doubt that it's just a small bump in the road. However, if I've had a horrible candidate experience, if people didn't call me back, if I had to sit around and wait 2 or 3 weeks, if I applied and never heard a thing, or people weren't attentive during my interview, well, now I start my first day going, well, we'll see how this goes. And guess what? When my mindset is, we'll see how this goes, and then there's that exact same bump in the road during my onboarding, my willingness to stay longer starts to diminish. And so the first bumps make me go, maybe a little bit more hesitant. And the second bump goes, And by the third bump, I'm like, you know what? Some of those other people I was talking to might be better. And so it has a huge impact on how long you are willing to stick it out through the bumps and really wait to see if it's an organization that you love. But if you've not handled candidate experience well, you are absolutely setting up the chance and the likelihood that you will lose people on the back end. So all of that is about the hiring. And you can see how hiring and retention go hand in hand. If we aren't doing a great job on the hiring side, you set yourself up to fail on the retention side because your candidates come in less happy. And more importantly, your employees have this opening for longer and longer, and they're getting more and more frustrated. So now you've got this big tear. And what's interesting right now, as we talked about trends, companies are growing like hand over fist, right? You need more people. And so your existing employees are getting kind of tired, maybe a little burnt out, and an infusion of new folks and new energy would be so helpful. It would actually help stem your turnover. But if you haven't handled the hiring part right, now you're at risk of feeling this pressure on both ends of the spectrum. So what do you do to make sure that you retain your top talent? First of all, is have a really strong onboarding process. This means knowing exactly what this person is going to do for the first 2 to 3 weeks. And not just here's the 10 things you need to learn, but how are you building out how they work together, how they're going to get to know their peers, how are they going to build trust within the team? And most importantly, how do you build trust as their manager? I had a client that they hired a new person back in March. She was a great candidate. She was phenomenal. She came on, rave reviews about her performance. 2 weeks ago, she went into her boss's office and said, there's an issue and I don't think I can stay here. That was the Thursday before 4th of July. I talked to her on Thursday, boss talked to her again Friday. Tuesday, she came in and resigned. All because of a relationship with one of the other people on the staff that she didn't feel was treating her the right way. Now, what's really, really sad about the fact that they lost this great employee was that when we converted them, put her on the books, I recommended to them, let me help you, hire us, we'll build the onboarding process for you. And he's like, no, we've got this. We've done this. We're good at this. Well, guess what? They didn't have an onboarding process for her. They onboarded her without spending time building the relationship. And ultimately, she left because she didn't feel like she had been given the opportunity to succeed in the first place. So it's really critical that you've got this in place. That leads right to, though, this piece of creating a culture of belonging. If you don't have a strong work environment where people come in and they're welcoming to new hires, you're likely to lose them. One of our other clients, one of the things we've spent a year and a half working with them on is every time we hire somebody new, they have two employees who go, I don't get a good vibe. I'm like, oh, geez, like you don't have a good vibe about anybody. But if we don't set them up for success and create an environment where people go, oh, they're happy I'm here, and they're not treated with respect, and they're not valued for the diversity that they bring, you're likely to lose them. All of that happens because we develop strong coaches and leaders. Your leadership team is the key to making sure that all of this works really, really well. So how much time have you invested in making sure that they are having regular coaching conversations, that they understand how to deliver effective feedback? They know how to adjust their style for each and every one of their team members. If you're doing this, it makes all the difference in keeping your people. If you're not, this great resignation is going to get really painful because you've neglected this over COVID. Then we've got to gather employee feedback. If you have not, particularly if over COVID, you did not reach out and ask people for feedback, you may be a little bit behind the eight ball already, but this is the perfect time to do it. Whether it be through employee focus groups or employee surveys, you need to know how people are feeling, because the person who hasn't told you where they're at is maybe the most likely person to leave, because they may not be necessarily bad enough that they're applying for jobs, but boy, if something came along, your most successful and most critical person could have that opportunity land in their lap. People are paying big dollars right now, big bonuses, big salaries. Things are competitive. So if you don't understand how your people are feeling, you're not going to be able to make the adjustments to make sure that great resignation doesn't happen. Most importantly, and the final piece I'll talk about though, is it's beyond just, are people happy because you bought them pizza for lunch, or you bring them donuts, or you do nice little things. People have to feel really good about their jobs. And so understanding roles and expectations is a critical component to this. I can't coach and develop you if I haven't made it clear what your role is. And if I'm not clear on my role, then I'm constantly frustrated by the fact that I'm either spending more time than I need to get the job done, or I'm frustrated because my peer isn't doing what I think they're supposed to do. So having, first and foremost, good job descriptions, not ones that have been sitting in a drawer covered with cobwebs for years, but really meaningful, relevant job descriptions where we've talked about, is this really what I should spend my time doing? And then we take these job descriptions that most people put in a drawer and never touch again, and we bring them to life through a concept we call RACI charts. Now, you are not going to find RACI charts in any HR book you ever read, but I've got to tell you, these are the most amazing HR tools you can ever use. RACI charts define for each person, each part of the process, who is responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And so now all of the times that you go, we had that decision made, and then Susie came out of left field and threw the whole thing up in the air, and now we are back at square one because we didn't know we were supposed to consult Susie. Now we've defined all of those pieces on the front end. If we forgot that Susie was supposed to be informed, or maybe we didn't even know that what we were working on impacted Susie, well, now I've defined that up front. So I can eliminate a lot of the team's frustration, and I can make sure everybody knows who's ultimately responsible. Most importantly, who's accountable, who's the one decision maker for that particular part of the process. When we take job descriptions and roles and responsibilities and transition them into a live working conversation around who's responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed, now people feel like they know that they're rowing all in the right same direction. Now it's fun to work. And you take all of this together, and now when you onboard your new person, they know exactly where they fit into the organization. And when they know how they fit into the organization, well, guess what? Now you start developing relationships that make people feel like they belong. All of those job descriptions help you coach and develop. And now you consistently have a way and means to be getting employee feedback and working the same way. So it is a constant cycle. This is not a one and done. But when you do all of these things, then you hire top talent because you spent time defining what's the right role and who's going to be most successful in it. All of this starts working hand in hand. Oftentimes we find we're losing people. And so we look for, we either didn't hire the right person, or we've got this problem over here, or they were missing this component. And the reality is it's some small combination of all of these things that's a little bit broken, that we have to really step back and say, what's our foundation and how do we get started? And when we do that, now we start to change a culture to a place that folks really want to stay. I am going to leave us there and open up for questions, thoughts, comments, questions around hiring and retaining your top talent.
If anybody has any questions, just unmute yourself and or you can put it in the chat, either way. But if anybody wants to jump in.
Hi guys, this is Linda at Elby's. I loved all the information that you just shared, and it's going to take our hiring process to another level. My main concern is being a very small business, the whole healthcare. I haven't quite figured out yet how we could offer. I mean, we have looked and looked and looked at different plans. Any guidance or information or that you could share that would possibly help us to be able to do that?
Absolutely, Linda. And feel free to reach out. I've got several referral partners that I think do a really nice job in this space, especially for small employers. I'm 5 people and I offer health insurance. It's a matter of, at the end of the day, honestly, it came down to the risk of losing the top talent that I needed in my organization wasn't worth not paying for health insurance. Now, what percentage you cover, all of the, there's a lot of factors that can go into that, and there's some creative ways. You used to be able to get away with a stipend. I will tell you, 2021 and health stipends are still a little bit of a struggle because people need access to the plan. So depending on your market and your industry, you may still need to say, no, we actually have a group plan option, but there are several out there that are really good alternatives. But I also would tell you that budgeting for this is well worth it, because the turnover that it will, the loss of employees that it will create, or the fact that you can't hire the talent you need, will ultimately probably cost you more in the end. So, but definitely, Linda, reach out, because we've got some good referral partners I would be happy to connect you with to see if we can't find you a better solution.
All right. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Tony, does the chamber participate in the, oh gosh, I don't remember the acronym.
The chamber insurance.
Health insurance?
We do.
Yeah.
We do.
Okay. Have you looked into that, Linda? The chamber's in a program.
Yeah. Yes, we did. And it still just wasn't anything that was, I guess, it just wasn't anything we thought we could afford to offer. And the coverage wasn't the best coverage either. And so when they looked at the plans, they were just disappointed, but we'll continue to look, because I know there's something out there for us that is going to be the perfect fit.
Like I said, Linda, feel free, reach out. I've got one in mind that I'd love to send you to, that I think could have a good option. They've worked well with some of our smaller employers.
Does anybody else have any questions?
I had a couple. This is Heather with Sign Gypsies. I was wondering if you could maybe give us some ideas on questions that we could ask when we're gathering employee feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes it's as easy as starting with, what do you like most and what drives you crazy, right? I will tell you that if you are a small business owner and you are the owner, sometimes people will be more open with you than others, even if it's out of they trust you, but they don't want to make you feel bad. So this is something that sometimes having somebody else run a focus group for you can be really cost effective. It's not expensive to do, and it's a good opportunity to get somebody else to get feedback for you, because you'll learn things that, again, mostly out of, it's not that they think they're going to get in trouble, but they do feel bad by giving feedback. So having somebody else do it can be super helpful. But certainly, what do you like most? What do you find most frustrating? If you were going to explain this job or this culture to a new hire, what would you tell them? One of the things that we've done with clients that when we write their employee handbooks is if they want us to, we actually have interviewed their teams and added a section in their employee handbook called tips from the team, which are things that the team would want to tell them as a new hire, like here's something you should know about the culture. And then they can use that as part of that elevator speech when they're hiring people to really get clear on what that information is. So those can be good. Some of the other good questions to get, if you need to dive into more detail, some of the questions around how would you best describe the team environment or the team approach? Where do you spend the majority of your time within the organization? All of those can give you good insight as to things to include in that discussion.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else have any questions? All right. Well, Katie, thank you so much for talking with us today. That was extremely useful information. I got some good notes here. And if anybody needs to connect with Katie, we will, can we share her information then, Tony, in the text or
yes, so we recorded this, and so when we share it, we'll share the information. So yes,
Awesome.
Thank you, Katie, very much.
Great. And then we can, if you guys have any questions, reach out to Katie. And then just remember that next month, BizBits will be live and in person at the Lake St. Louis City Hall. And we'll also have a Zoom option. And we're hoping to transition out of Zoom. I'd love to see all your lovely faces in person. And then Katie and Kathy, we'd love to have you join us at a chamber meeting. That'd be lovely to have you involved.
Great. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.